Welcome to Mystic Cat Stories, where forgotten voices return, where abandoned spaces breathe, and the earth hides impossible truths. Make sure to subscribe if you're ready for stories that blur the line between the seen and the unseen. Earth when the correction failed. The live streams from Orbit View Satellite 4 had become a kind of global lullaby. Earth from orbit, turning slowly, bathed in pale sunlight. Clouds drifted, cities glittered. The Terminator line crawled across the globe like a heartbeat. People kept the feed running in the background just to remind themselves the planet was still out there, alive, spinning, balanced between day and night. Since its launch in 2022, that stream had never once gone dark until one morning when everything changed. At 4:17 a.m. GMT, the image flickered. For a split second, the screen went black, then came back to life, but wrong. The Earth was gone. In its place stretched a flat, reflective surface, fading into blackness, like the edge of a continent, sliced clean off into void. The planet no longer looked spherical. It looked like a level platform rimmed with trembling points of light that resembled city reflections at the brink of darkness. 2 seconds later, the feed normalized, the familiar curve returned, oceans, clouds, atmosphere. Most viewers assumed it was a glitch, but some had recorded the stream and the frame survived. A user under the handle Vosto98 uploaded the clip online. He wasn't trying to start anything, just curious. In the comments, people from different time zones confirmed they'd seen it, too. Every description matched. A smooth surface, a bright edge, and darkness beyond it. Hours later, the video vanished. In its place, the same timestamp reappeared, but the glitch was gone. The official Blue Sat 4 channel called it a visualization anomaly. The footage, they said, had been corrupted and replaced with a corrected version. NASA followed up with a short statement. At 4:17 GMT, data instability was recorded. The imagery does not represent Earth's true form. No one explained how a data instability could momentarily erase the planet's curvature, especially when all other satellite systems had been operating perfectly. Still, people talked. Users dissected the surviving frame. Some said it was just optical distortion. Others zoomed in and claimed to see small moving shadows near the edge, like outlines of tall structures. Within a day, social media filled with shaky screenshots taken from laptops and TV. The horizon in every one of them looked impossibly straight. On a few, faint vertical lines appeared at the edge, as if something solid marked the planet's border. Those posts spread quickly and disappeared just as fast. Soon after, viewers noticed something odd on the official stream's archive page. The broadcast from March 12th had been retagged as corrupted. A restored file was uploaded in its place, but Blue Sat 4 had no backup system. It was a continuous live feed. The moderators themselves admitted as much. Then came the delay. Previously, the stream had a 3-second lag behind real-time telemetry. After the incident, that delay jumped to 12 seconds. The explanation, data optimization. Reporters pressed by View for details. The company responded tersely that everything remained within operational parameters. But inside engineering channels, the word correction started circulating. A week later, an anonymous technician posted one sentence in a private forum: "Nothing broke. The correction program just turned off for a moment." What we saw was Earth without the filter. The message spread across the internet within hours. Some took it as a joke. Others didn't. Shortly afterward, people noticed another change. The live stream no longer showed the Terminator line, the moving frontier between day and night. The camera always switched angles before the shadow reached the frame, as if avoiding it. No official explanation followed. Discussions vanished, old re-uploads were deleted, and accounts sharing backup footage were quietly suspended. Those who'd seen it kept repeating the same phrase. It was still Earth, just without the shape we're used to. While checking the live stream page, several users noticed a hidden line of code. It said that a 12-second delay had now been built into the system, and that a special parameter controlling the planet's curvature correction was permanently enabled. For most viewers, it meant nothing, but those who understood how the stream worked realized what it meant. The filter was now always on. NASA responded to the press saying that the so-called curvature correction was simply part of the visual stabilization software and that it didn't affect the real image data. But longtime viewers remembered clearly that feature hadn't existed before the glitch. It appeared only after the event at 4/17. In June, a mysterious account appeared on a private video board, username Operator47. The user posted a 3-second clip labeled only with a timestamp. BlueSat4, May 14, 0417. The footage was dark, grainy, but clear enough to show it again. That same razor, straight line of light along a flat surface fading into nothing. No curve, no atmosphere, just a horizon that shouldn't exist. The coordinates matched the official feed. So did the telemetry. It couldn't have been faked that easily. Within hours, the video went viral across every major platform. Some claimed to see faint shapes along the edge, spires, towers, or reflections. Others said it was just compression noise. But one thing was undeniable. The time of recording was exactly 9 weeks after the first incident. It meant the anomaly had repeated. By the next morning, the file was gone. The account Operator 47 was deleted by request of the rights holder. No one knew who the rights holder was, but copies survived. They always do. Analysts compared the frames with previous official footage. Every reference point, star fields, city lights, cloud formations lined up perfectly. The only difference was the shape. The Earth in that frame was flat. When the leak spread, or By View released a short statement, BlueSat4 live feeds are temporarily suspended for system modernization. On its homepage appeared a single message in white text against a black background. Streaming will resume following visualization algorithm updates. For many, that read less like maintenance and more like confirmation. Days later, a European journalist received an anonymous email from someone claiming to be a BlueSat engineer. The message contained just a few lines. The system shows what it receives. To make it look familiar, we apply a curvature filter. When it failed, the camera showed the original feed. We don't know why it looks like that. The journalist published the quote. Within 24 hours, the article was removed, and the reporter issued a public correction saying the source could not be verified. When the feed finally returned, something was different. The image looked cleaner, brighter, too bright. The oceans shimmered like glass. The cloud edges were unnaturally soft, and the night side of Earth was gone. The camera never showed darkness anymore. The planet's shadow stopped short of the frame as though trimmed out. By late summer of 2024, a private amateur astronomer in Perth, Australia, decided to bypass the official stream. Using a small satellite dish and an old NAS, a signal decoder, he captured BlueSat's raw transmission directly. For less than a second, his recorder caught an image before the system locked him out. It showed the same thing. A glowing edge, a flat plane, and void beyond it. When he tried to upload the video, his account was suspended. A day later, the file itself disappeared from his computer storage, not corrupted, erased. That was when the rumor started that the BlueSat feed was no longer showing space at all. but a simulation rendered in real time. Coders examining the video metadata claimed new hidden layers were being composited into every frame. Layers that painted in the curvature. None of it could be proven, but no one could debunk it either. In September, an independent podcast aired an interview with a man who identified himself only as a former BlueSat operator. His voice was disguised, but his words were clear. After that first glitch, we were told never to show the Terminator line again. The instruction was simple. If the horizon looks too flat, switch angles. People can't handle the questions. The next day, the interview disappeared from every major platform. The podcast's channel was wiped. By January 2025, the BlueSat 4 mission officially ended. A replacement, BlueSat 5, was launched from Cape Canaveral, promoted as a new generation of orbital imaging with enhanced color correction and stabilization. The new feed began within weeks. It looked flawless, always perfectly spherical, colors vibrant, shadows diffused to the point of blur. The transition from light to dark was now so soft it resembled a fog, not a shadow. The Earth seemed too round, too polished, too perfect. Viewers who remembered March 12th couldn't let it go. Some said the new planet looked slightly larger, as if someone had stretched the image to hide something. Others stayed silent, watching the endless rotation of the bright blue globe. Comforting, familiar, believable. Every so often in the comments under the stream, a single phrase appeared, 0417 without correction. The comments never lasted long. Within minutes, they vanished, cleaned away as if the page itself refused to remember. But one night in April, something happened again. For exactly 5 seconds, the feed froze, then flickered. The planet wavered, and for a heartbeat, the curvature vanished. A straight blade of light cut across the frame, shadow sliding past its edge like a curtain. Then the screen went black. When the feed returned, everything was normal again. On the official site, a notice appeared moments later. Due to scheduled updates, the live image may temporarily differ from real-time conditions. The broadcast continued as if nothing had happened. Yet for those who had seen it, for the few still watching at that late hour, it was enough. Because once again, at 4:17, the correction had failed. And for just a moment, the Earth had shown what it really looks like when the filter is gone. It's coming soon. In July of 1999, Seattle was wrapped in a humid haze that carried the smell of salt and gasoline. Down by the old waterfront near Elliott Bay, the weekend flea market was buzzing with people. You could find anything there, from nautical charts and rusted ship tools to vintage cameras and tangled boxes of wires. On one of the folding tables, half buried under cracked photo paper and camera straps, sat an old Canon A1. Its body was scratched, the shutter cover cracked in 2 places. It caught the eye of a local photographer, Michael Barron, 40 years old, a quiet man who taught night classes on film photography at the community college. He'd been shooting on old Canons since his teenage years. He loved their weight, the click of their mechanics, the way the metal felt alive in his hands. The seller, an elderly man wearing a faded navy cap, said the camera had been sitting in a closet for years. Still might work, he added almost apologetically. The price was barely worth arguing over. Barron bought it mostly for the lens, an original FD50mm1. 4. The kind collectors hunt for. That evening, back home, he took the camera apart for cleaning. Inside, he found a half-used roll of Kodak Gold 100 film, still threaded tightly around the spool. On the lid, someone had written in smudged ink, April '88. The roll wasn't fully wound, which meant someone had been shooting and never finished. He turned the cartridge over in his hand. thinking old film from flea markets usually meant disappointment. Overexposed, damaged, or eaten through by humidity. Still, the next morning, he dropped it off at a small downtown photo lab he'd been using for years. The owner, an old technician named Howard Cobb, glanced at the cartridge and said, "It's ancient but intact. I'll give it a shot." 3 days later, Howard called. "You need to come see this," he said. "I've never seen anything like it." The negatives had 36 frames. Against all odds, the film had aged perfectly. No streaks, no fading. The exposure was even, the contours sharp. Howard, not a man prone to exaggeration, looked almost unsettled. "It's like somebody shot this yesterday on a digital camera." The first frame showed Seattle's waterfront, but with a bridge that didn't exist in '99, a suspension bridge with 2 towers and vanishing lines of cables. Barron stared at it, not immediately understanding what he was seeing. Then it hit him. He was looking at something that hadn't been built yet. The next few frames showed familiar districts of the city, but different. Taller buildings, new facades, storefronts with modern fonts and English logos he didn't recognize. One rooftop carried a sign that read Seabank, a name he'd never heard before. At first, he thought it was an elaborate fake, but the chemical tests didn't lie. The film was authentic, late '80s production. The silver halides, the grain structure, all consistent with film manufactured decades ago. He brought the negatives to the university print lab, where technicians examined them under a microscope. One of them, a veteran photo analyst, said quietly, "It's real film. No double exposure, no retouching." Someone actually took these pictures. Together, they enlarged the first frame to an 8 by 10 print. There it was again, the twin suspension bridges spanning the bay. The problem was those bridges wouldn't even begin construction for another 10 years. Barron said nothing. The technician opened an old archive binder filled with city blueprints. The bridges were there, early conceptual drafts from municipal planning boards labeled Proposed 2010 Development. The photograph showed the completed result years before the first concrete was poured. Later that night, Barron sat by his desk, studying each frame through a magnifier. One shot showed the cultural district, glass buildings, a theater with a glowing sign, Pacific Playhouse. In '99, that entire block was still a construction pit. He didn't feel afraid at first, just irritated. Facts weren't supposed to contradict each other. Photography for him was pure physics and chemistry, not prophecy. In his notebook, he wrote down the first line of what would later become a 20-year journal. Film roll found July 3, 1999. Contains images of a city that does not yet exist. At first, Michael tried to explain it rationally. Maybe someone had staged the photos, built a miniature model of the city, an architectural panorama, and photographed it up close. He knew designers who made such models for the Seattle Planning Department, but none of them ever used real film. They worked with computer renders and slides, not analog cameras. He showed the prints to a colleague from the photography circle. The man studied them for a long time, then said, "If this is a fake, it's the best I've ever seen. It looks like real light, but it wasn't digital." In 1999, there was no software capable of simulating sunlight scattering, reflections, and depth that perfectly. Michael brought one of the prints to the city archives to compare it with the official planning maps. The archivist looked at it and frowned. "Strange," she said. "That's the new downtown theater project, but it's scheduled for 2018. He didn't bother explaining that the photograph was taken on film made in the '80s. He just nodded and asked to make a copy. What bothered him wasn't fear. It was that no one else seemed disturbed by it. He needed clear answers. Light obeys physics. Film obeys chemistry. Neither should predict the future. By late August, he sent the negatives to a university imaging lab for analysis. They confirmed the film's age, roughly 20 years old, silver halide. Based, no signs of reprinting or exposure tampering. The report was brief. Content does not correspond to estimated exposure date. Retake impossible. After that, Michael stopped showing the photos to anyone. He sealed the negatives in a paper envelope, labeled it Series B99, developed July 1999, and placed it inside a metal file box beneath his desk. 2 months later, he looked again, not out of curiosity, but out of habit. On frame 29, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. A man sitting in a wheelchair near the bay, a camera resting on his knees. The skyline behind him, the same futuristic Seattle, glass facades shimmering in the mist. Michael froze. The face was blurred, but the outline, the nose, the jaw, the posture felt disturbingly familiar. He didn't tell anyone, he just wrote in his notebook, frame 29, man in wheelchair, possibly myself. Visual error. That was his first attempt to protect himself from what he already suspected. He spent the next week checking everything. Frame numbers, exposure lengths, sequence order. The photo of the man came last after the bridge panorama, as if the photographer had ended the roll with a self-portrait. He wanted to believe it was coincidence, a trick of the light, maybe, but the more he studied it, the less random it looked. Even the collar of the man's shirt was folded the same way Michael wore his. He closed the notebook, slid the negatives back into the envelope, and added a new line on the front. Do not display, review later. Then he turned off the desk lamp, and for the first time that night didn't turn it back on. For almost a year, the envelope sat untouched. It lay between stacks of class notes and student portfolios. Every once in a while grading assignments, Michael's fingers brushed against the corner of that envelope, but he never opened it. In December of 2000, he finally gave in. He wanted to check if the film had deteriorated. It hadn't. The emulsion was pristine, so he printed only one frame, the man in the chair. He made it small to study the details more closely. The print showed the man sitting by the bay facing a glass building that reflected the morning light. The shape of the structure looked like a modern theater, though nothing like it existed back then. The man sat still, hands resting on his knees, the camera across his lap. The strap of the camera was identical to Michael's. Even the worn edge on the right side matched perfectly. It could have been coincidence, if not for the position of the hands. Left hand slightly curled, right hand holding the lens exactly the way he did whenever he shot. He told no one. Back then, photographers mostly talked about aperture and composition, not time paradoxes. But one night, he showed the photo to an architect friend without explaining who the man was. The friend studied it and said, "Interesting. It looks like you, only older." After that, Michael stopped taking portraits altogether. At exhibits, he showed only landscapes, ports, rail yards, abandoned industrial zones. People joked he'd moved into architecture. Nobody knew why. Sometimes, when he developed new roles, he had the eerie feeling that he'd already taken that exact shot before, that someone else had stood in the same spot under the same light decades earlier. He didn't link it directly to the old Kodak roll, but each time he wrote down every technical detail, lens, time, exposure, as if afraid someone might one day compare them. 2 decades passed quietly. Seattle changed. What once looked impossible, the bridges, the mirrored towers, the theater on the bay had become real parts of the city. By 2015, the The same glass-fronted building from that strange photograph finally stood near the water, just as it had appeared on the film. The geometry of the streets, the glow of the lamps, even the slope of the sidewalk, all matched perfectly. Michael turned 60 that year. He still taught photography, though his hands had grown slower. Sometimes walking through the new neighborhoods, he caught himself thinking that everything looked familiar, as if the city had followed the pictures instead of the other way around. In 2019, a local museum hosted a photo exhibit called Old Seattle Through the Lens of Locals. In one gallery, Michael stopped in front of a print by a young photographer. A panoramic view of the bay, gleaming glass towers in the distance, the same composition as his old frame from the Kodak roll. The resemblance was perfect. That night, he dug through his boxes until he found the old metal file. The envelope was still there, marked Series B99. He placed the new print over the old negative. The skyline lined up to the millimeter. Even the cloud formations were nearly identical, frozen as if time itself had replayed the same day. He pulled out the small print of the man in the wheelchair. The realization came slowly. The man in the photo was now his age. The gray hair, the tired eyes, the stillness. The picture hadn't shown an alternate version of him. It had shown the same man years before it happened. A few months later, Michael suffered a stroke. His right hand never fully recovered and walking became impossible. During therapy, the doctors recommended a wheelchair for mobility. He chose a simple folding model. His old Canon E1 still sat on the shelf. Dusty, the brass around the lens dulled by time. He didn't take pictures anymore. Sometimes he just turned the focus ring, that familiar motion that once meant bringing things into clarity. In the spring of 2022, a small local TV crew visited him for a series about vintage cameras. They'd heard that he owned an old Canon with a mysterious history, but they didn't know the details. Michael greeted them calmly. The operator adjusted the light. The reporter asked, "Do you still keep that camera?" He smiled faintly. "I do. It doesn't see anymore, but it still remembers." He placed the Canon gently across his knees. The cameraman, without realizing, started recording. Through the viewfinder, the frame showed an elderly man in a wheelchair by the window holding a camera. Outside, the reflection of the same glass building shimmered in the daylight. Later, when they reviewed the footage, the assistant noticed something strange. The shot was identical to one of the old photos from his archive. The same angle, the same light, almost to the inch, only now it wasn't film anymore. It was real. Michael passed away that summer, a week before the program aired. The segment never went on television. In a studio note, the editor simply wrote, "Author requested not to use the interview. Reason unspecified." After his death, his archive was transferred to the Seattle Museum of Photography. Inside one of the boxes, they found the metal case with the envelope labeled Series B99, the notebook with his dated notes, and a single print, the man in the wheelchair by the bay. The museum commissioned a lab to verify the film. The analysis confirmed it. Genuine Kodak stock produced before 1990. Silver composition consistent with late 80s manufacturing. No trace of re-exposure. No digital manipulation. The serial number on the Canon lens matched the one visible in the photograph. The same camera now sitting behind museum glass. The experts issued no explanation. The report ended with a single sentence. Exposure date undetermined. Authenticity inconclusive. In 2025, the museum opened a new exhibition called Film as Memory. Among the prints was the now famous frame number 29. The label read Michael Barron, Seattle, unknown date. On the back of the photograph, written faintly in pencil, were 3 words, "It's coming soon." Handwriting experts confirmed the words were his own, but in all his notes, letters, and interviews, he never once mentioned writing them.